Hey, welcome to this week's edition of Local Focus. We just got off the McLaren Cup. What's the McLaren Cup, you ask? Well, that's an athletic competition that some of the Rio Rancho and Cleveland students participated in, and it's kind of to bring awareness to teen suicide and things like that. So I wanted to tell that story, and I wanted to broach those topics a little more because they're a little too taboo, in my opinion. Teen suicide is real, teen depression is real, emotional sexual abuse is real, and these things happen, and they happen in our community, in this athletic community. So tonight, I do want to tell the story of Carissa McGee. She's a perfect guest to help talk about this. Her story at times will be uncomfortable. These topics at times will be uncomfortable, but I hope for this to be an important discussion. But for those reasons, viewer discretion is advised. My guest this week is Carissa McGee, a two-time Gatorade Player of the Year in basketball and track, and an author of a book that just came out that I just finished reading, Trust Your Struggle, and we'll get through that through the show. Welcome. And first of all, how can people get this book?
Oh, thank you for having me. This is really quite an honor. My book can be published on Amazon. It's online. It's pretty accessible. If you even just Google Trust Your Struggle, there is a link to being able to purchase it.
Right. And I know Amazon will have some more coming in soon. I was told from a friend who ordered last night that he ordered the last copy, so I know they're expecting some more. You can also get that at BookBuddy, which is the publisher. So I want to delve into your story a little bit. And it starts with athletic greatness, as a lot of these stories do on my show with these interviews. Gatorade Player of the Year in two different sports. I mean, that's pretty unheard of. Talk us through the early beginnings of your athletic career.
Yeah, those were pretty, those are like the peaks of my talent. But I really got started when I was 6. I was in second grade playing basketball, following the footsteps of my sister. She had joined the elementary school team, and I decided that I wanted to pursue that as well. And, I really didn't consider myself to be the most graceful athlete or just even really athletic in general. But once I got involved with basketball and the physical aspect of the game, I fell in love with it. And as I grew and developed, I realized that I have a natural knack for athleticism, and I decided to just expand that in different sports. Growing up, we were really encouraged on our teams to try different sports, to better our footwork. We needed to be doing either soccer or running track for our vertical jump, doing volleyball and those things of those natures. And so we were really encouraged growing up to explore different sports. And so I pursued volleyball. I really enjoyed track and field. And I really I thrived on it just because it was the talk of the town. It was what you were supposed to be doing as a kid. We played outside a lot. We were in the streets until the street lights came on. Growing up for me it's different than what it is now. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have social media. We didn't have those distractions. So it was really about what we did with our free time outside, entertaining ourselves, and sports was a huge part of that. I didn't really start taking sports too seriously, though, until later on in my life, where I lost my sister, who was really a role model and like a mother-like figure to me. And once I lost her, she had left to the Air Force. I didn't really have much to fall back on, but I fell back on my sports, basketball in particular. And once I really dove into it and gave it everything I had, that's when I feel that my athleticism really got to shine, because it was more than just for fun. It was more than just, competing with my sister, sibling rivalry. It was more about finding my purpose, finding a place. And so when I really gave it my all, that's when things took off for me, and I soared. And as I developed, I had really good coaches along the way that pushed me, that challenged me, that weren't afraid to, demand more of me. And in all aspects, in all the sports that I did, I had very competitive coaches that really understood the game. And that is really what, was my springboard into my high school career, which then ultimately led me to those achievements.
When did you feel that basketball in particular started to be kind of a necessary distraction for you? When did basketball become your true love?
Yeah. I was 8 years old. I remember it distinctly because, like I had said, my older sister, who was a mother-like figure to me, when she left for the Air Force, I was devastated. I didn't know how I was going to spend my days, my nights or my summers. I used to hang out with her a lot, and she would take me everywhere with her, and I loved it. And then when she had to go to the Air Force, I was lost, really confused. I didn't have a very tight-knit family, and so I decided to channel the pain, the grief, my longing to belong somewhere. I decided to channel that into basketball because basketball had proven to me that it was always going to be there. It was reliant, and it reflected whatever I put into it, and I appreciated that. So if I gave it 100%, it would give me back 100%. And it went from just being something that was fun to really a truly committed part of my life during that time. And it has yet to change. Basketball is the core of who I am. I have been able to associate just everything in life through sports. That's how I understand life. I compare it to sports, whether it's discipline to getting up every single day and going to work. That's the same thing. Am I going to go to practice? Am I going to make an excuse of why I can't go? Or, just having that appreciation for hard work paying off. I got that through basketball. I put in my effort, I put in my work, and in the end, I was able to reap a championship or, the trophy, first place. And that's a very satisfying feeling that I didn't get from anything else other than basketball.
So at this point in your high school life, you're carrying a very good GPA. You have 2 Gatorade banners hanging in that gym. That's pretty special. But there's obviously some cloudy stuff going on at home. Your home life is troubled. Mm-hmm. And take us through however much of that you want to take us through.
Yeah, I explained in my book, which is a novel. It's based on a true story, but there are fictitious parts definitely interwoven into it. But really my book and my story outlines what was going on behind closed doors. Being a star athlete in a smaller community, you have a lot of pressure to live up to the fame, to live up to the name, and that pressure, albeit it's enjoyable, it can be very damaging for somebody who is struggling emotionally and mentally behind closed doors, which, in all fairness, nobody knew about that because I had done such a good job of putting up a mask. And I struggled with depression, and I struggled with just accepting who I was as an individual. My sexual orientation really threw a curveball in my life, and being able to articulate myself, express my emotions, that was something that I hadn't learned how to do. Growing up in my household, we didn't speak about feelings. We didn't speak about emotions. It was swept under the rug, and we were expected to just put a smile on and keep pushing forward. And, that was, to some extent, that was appropriate in some cases because I learned what tough love is, and to, just have grit and bite the bullet and being able to persevere and push through certain things. But as a child, I needed guidance on how to deal with the emotions I had inside. Whether it be just the pressures of going to high school. Every typical teenager has to go through these emotional roller coaster rides. as they mature. And just having a safe space to share those emotions, or to share my thoughts and my confusion on certain things. I didn't have that. I had to bottle everything up. And then the pressure of being a superstar, of being the star athlete in a small town, I didn't have an outlet for that either. My outlet was only basketball, which was like inevitably going to bring me more attention. And so it was kind of just perpetuating itself in this vicious cycle, and I didn't have an outlet. And so really having all that stuff bottled up, it was honestly only a matter of time before it exploded, or before it got out of hand and I wasn't able to control it. And I think that that's something that I can reflect back on and acknowledge, that emotions, as taboo as they might be for some people, or as menial as it might seem, we really need to be acknowledging those things. What each person, what each child is going through their development, having that safe space, knowing that it's okay to have these emotions, that anger is not something to be ashamed of, that it's something that is healthy, that it's appropriate. And when it's discussed and digested in a way that is productive, you can take that anger and channel it into something that's about good movement, that motivates people and inspires people. And to not have that space, to not being able to talk about these certain things, I know that directly contributed to my mental health issues and my concerns. My depression was spiraling out of control, and I was left often just by myself to deal with those things. And as a teenager, you don't know much about life. You only know what years that you've been on this earth, and it's not much, and you have still so much to go through, to learn, and to just be expected to handle them, to manage them, and to do it appropriately. That's asking too much, I believe.
And you're reflecting upon it now, obviously very accurately and eloquently, but did you realize what was happening to your mental health at the time?
No, I
and
didn't.
Looking back on it, what are some red flags that maybe someone that could be at that age now that maybe they could see? What are some red flags?
The isolation. I would be either on the court with my team traveling, or in a class, in my classroom. And if I wasn't in those areas, I was locking myself in my room, trying to cope with the feelings that I had, with the struggles that I was going through. That isolation was my number one, for me, red flag. Because I was a very outgoing, anybody who knew me at that time, I was very fun and engaging and charismatic. And then behind closed doors, I was completely different. I was quiet. I was really locked away inside my own mind. And I didn't want to be around other people. I liked the solitude and the privacy, because I was so confused on who I was outside of basketball, who I was outside of being a student. I didn't know who Carissa was, because I was struggling with all these inward feelings and emotions. I didn't know how to cope with those things. So, that was a major red flag. And another red flag for me was losing interest in anything that once used to bring me interest. I lost interest in just watching comedy. I used to enjoy laughing a lot. And I would just watch comedy shows, or we would have team dinners and we'd be sharing stories, and I used to laugh a lot. And when I lost my laughter, that was a red flag for me.
Lastly, before we go to break, and I think this is a good time to break, but you mentioned that this is a novel, but it's got a lot of true stories. This is the book, Trust Your Struggle. I highly recommend. Let me get my giant hands out of the way of the title. There we go. See, but you mentioned it's a novel. But one thing that really stood out to me, and maybe you can tell me how real this was, the concept of living under the same roof as a parent, but not speaking for weeks at a time. The silent game, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how real was that?
Yeah, it was It was real, 100% of it. And it troubles me just thinking about it because the silent game, although it was a form of punishment, it was also a lesson that, my mother was trying to instill upon me, which was, if you don't like it, too bad. You need to get along with what I have to say. And that's so troubling to me because at no point do I feel that a child's voice should be silenced. I really believe that stifling a child's voice, stifling anybody's voice, is one of the most damaging things that you can do, because you lose your sense of identity, you lose your sense of liberty, and you lose your sense of purpose. If I have no voice, why am I here? If I have no voice, why do I matter? And to have that stifled from somebody who is supposed to love you unconditionally, who is supposed to have your best interest at heart, there's nothing more powerful from that. And there's nothing more damaging that you could do, I feel, to your child. So the silent game, although we used to, make light of it, my sisters and I, of, oh yeah, here comes that game again, silent game. Now that I'm older and I can look back on that, that really played a major role in my ability to inadequately cope with my feelings and my emotions, and which ultimately, played a huge factor in why I believed that killing myself or harming someone else was the only way out.
We'll be right back.
High school sports are back. The 2018-19 season kicks off, and you could watch every Proview Network broadcast live on the NFHS network. Every moment, from every game, from every sport, including all NMAA state championships. Get your highly discounted monthly pass now. Go to ProviewNetworks.com and sign up. Watch New Mexico's best.
All right, I want to move us forward now to maybe a little more happier time in your life, and that's when you met Martina. So take us through that.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. She and I met on the basketball court. I didn't actually officially meet her until my sophomore year during the state finals. We were in the Final Four game together. But I had known about her since the 8th grade. I had seen her play as a freshman, and I was just completely captivated with her game. She is a phenomenal point guard, and growing up, before I got to high school, I was a point guard. I was, short all through elementary school and middle school, and I idolized point guards because I knew the importance of them on the court. And to see the way that she was able to maneuver the ball and to command the floor, it was very impressive. As an 8th grader, I was very intrigued with her game. And then, fast forward to my sophomore year when I finally get to meet her on the court, we got to stand next to each other during a free throw. And I explain this in the book, it's pretty detailed. But, just being able to have my first conversation with her, I was lost for words, I honestly was. And I couldn't really understand why that was. At the time, I was still struggling with who I was, my identity, my sexual orientation. I still hadn't made a definitive decision on that. But something inside of me sparked when she spoke to me. And, my intrigue grew. And after that, I just knew I needed to talk to her on a more personal level. So, that summer of my sophomore year, when I was going into my junior year, I finally got the guts to talk with her, to speak with her. And, I didn't know really how to express my feelings for her because I was still confused about them myself. But I knew that I wanted to start that dialogue. So, I don't want to spoil anybody who reads the book, but I obtained her phone number, And from there,
Yes, if I could interrupt, one of the really cool things in the book, the way it's put together is, by the way, phenomenal.
Thank you.
The way it concurrently runs from time incarcerated to flashing back to events, but the way it's constructed in the book, some pretty dark chapters about stuff that was going on while you're incarcerated, is then followed by that chapter, right, where your spoiler alert, your best friend gets the digits for you.
Yeah.
And after reading a couple of chapters of that darkness, I find myself reading that chapter just saying, "Go get those digits," right? I mean, so the book is really put together well. But go ahead, continue.
That's awesome. Thank you, because that's exactly what I was aiming to do, and that's because I want the reader to go on the roller coaster that I was experiencing. I had very low moments in my life that were equally matched with high moments. And meeting Martina, that relationship, sparking that off, that was definitely one of the higher moments in my life. And I did not know what would come of the relationship when I first started speaking with her, but it didn't take long for me to fully understand where this was headed. We started speaking and talking, and neither one of us had explored, dating in the same sex. We did not know anything about that. And so she was my first and I was her first. And, that kind of added to the chemistry as well. But it wasn't until, it didn't take very long for me to just know that spark, that initial spark, that really strong interest that I had, it was there for a reason. I was able to see that she was definitely somebody I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. And at 15, I can hear all the parents now saying, "Oh gosh, please don't say that." My kid right now swears that they found their soulmate, and 9 times out of 10, it's usually a person that they don't approve of. But I was one of those stories where I met my soulmate, and I knew it when I was 15 years old. And, I asked her when I was 15 if she would marry me, and she thought I was crazy for that. But I had not found or felt such a strong connection with anything or anybody outside of basketball that I had felt for Martina. So,
how strong did that connection have to be, considering she played at Sandia, you played at Mayfield? Obviously, you guys aren't even growing up in the same town.
yeah, absolutely, that connection.
What barriers did that create?
It created more of the appeal type barriers. Absolutely, we weren't able to see each other as often as we might have wanted to, but we also, thrived on that of what's to come. So it added to the mix of things, the chemistry definitely built from that. But I mean, growing up and playing on different teams and in different communities, in Albuquerque and Las Cruces, although they are 2 of the largest cities, in New Mexico, they're still very different in the way that they operate, Albuquerque has a metro, it has that city life, it has that city feel to it. Las Cruces didn't really have that. It was just a large town, most people knew everybody, whether directly or indirectly. And so we just had different upbringings, different philosophies and beliefs about life, but the things that we shared in common were our morals, things that were deeply rooted in us. We appreciated hard work and discipline. We loved the game of basketball. We really enjoyed being able to be outspoken and sharing our opinions and, having comfort in knowing that I wasn't going to judge her and she wasn't going to judge me. That was something that I knew was unique because I hadn't experienced that before, like I said, outside of basketball. And, I was young and I had traveled just for basketball purposes, but I hadn't really lived outside of New Mexico. And so that was always brought up. That was always something that, people would throw, wait until you're older and you get to travel and you meet other people. And absolutely, I understand that and I see it, but I also know that when you find something that you believe beyond a doubt is meant for you, hold on to it.
Now, at this point, having gone through what you've gone through at home, how did you expect your mother to react to this when, I guess, the news became official, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that has to be a mental struggle within itself, right?
Yeah, it was. I was terrified for it to come out. I really was. I was terrified not just for my mom or for my family's sake, but just for the community, because in 2005, it was same-sex marriages weren't even on the table. It was still something that was still extremely taboo. And So there was a lot of pressure of, am I going to be accepted? Will I be rejected? I had no idea what was really going on because I didn't have anybody to talk with about it. So I couldn't even really understand fully what I was going through, and was this healthy? Was this normal? Am I, is something wrong with me? Those questions definitely came up, and I had to have this internal battle. But when I first thought about how my mother would respond to it, there was no way I could have anticipated that it was going to come out the way that it was. I could not anticipate her response. I thought maybe the silent game would come back into play. I thought maybe, we would just leave it unspoken about, push it under the rug like we do with most other topics, and other feelings. But to have her respond in a way that was so candid and so hurtful. I mean, you can't anticipate that kind of pain. And I think that it was something that, really challenged just where I was at that time in my life, really challenged my discipline, really challenged me as an athlete, as a student. It really pushed me to accept the decision I was making. I know that there's a lot of negative that might have come from her response, but there was a lot of positive that did as well. And I was able to develop the courage and to maintain my integrity and to understand and appreciate the level of commitment that came from stating who I was and what I wanted to do. So although it was painful and although it was hurtful, I was able to take that experience and really use it as motivation and fuel to build a strong foundation of who I am and who I'm trying to become.
And how challenging was it to put those details on paper? I mean, was it almost like reliving it again?
Yeah. And, it was. And there were times, weeks even, that I wasn't able to go back to that stage. I would have to stick to talking about prison because, believe it or not, there were plenty of moments in my incarceration that were much easier than dealing with my reality that I had at home. So when I was writing the chapters about my past and about my home life, it was hard. I was having moments that I would have to take a step back, regain my composure, remind myself, use some coping skills that I have developed to take me back, put me back in this moment, in this present time, because my memories of what the story that I share are so close to being 100% accurate that it's hard, it was difficult not to slip back into that reality. And so, I had to really, really push myself to stay present in writing some of these pieces.
We're going to take another break here. We're talking with Carissa McGee about Trust Your Struggle, which is a book you can get on Amazon or BookBuddy, which is the publisher. And this would be a good time to break because the reaction at home kind of triggered events. So we'll pick it up from there when we get back.
Dreamstyle Remodeling has been wowing homeowners in New Mexico since 1989. Selected as Best Custom Home Remodeler for 3 consecutive years by readers of the Albuquerque Journal, we're also your exclusive provider for top home improvement brands like Renewal by Anderson, Four Seasons, Blaze King, and many others. Founded and headquartered in Albuquerque, Dreamstyle Remodeling is family-owned and now employs more than 500 people across the southwestern U.S. In fact, we've helped more than 60,000 1,000 homeowners improved their home in New Mexico, Arizona, California, Idaho, and West Texas. We're committed to providing a superior customer experience. We've earned 4.6 stars with hundreds of online reviews and have an A+ with the BBB. Dreamstyle Remodeling is a proud supporter of UNM Athletics. Visit our beautiful 10,000 square foot showroom at 1460 Renaissance Boulevard across from Sam's Club, or dreamstyleremodeling.com to make your home remodeling dreams come true.
We're back with Carissa McGee, the author of Trust Your Struggle and the Gatorade Player of the Year in basketball and track, former Mayfield star. And at this point, you do such an eloquent job of talking about it in the present. But I mean, what's your mental health like at this point? Looking back at it from your perspective now, but also from the perspective of in the moment. I mean, what were you feeling at the moment?
Feeling at the moment. Wow, that's a loaded question just because the feelings that I had were justified, but also extremely confusing. To try and put into words what it really feels to be completely and utterly alone, it's very hard. It's something that, for those who have experienced it, could probably understand the struggle that I have of trying to put it into words. You know, after I had, told my mother about my sexual orientation, my girlfriend, and how I felt about that, things took a turn for the worse, definitely. I was not able to fathom life, much of life after that moment. And I felt like I was isolated from anything and everything that I loved, because her rejection of who I was becoming and who I was internally, like who I just innately was, that rejection triggered something inside of me that I hadn't felt before. I knew what it was to have a loss. I had lost, my sister at a young age. I had struggled with, dealing with the feelings that came from the molestation and those personal things that I had to endure as a young child. But the rejection from my mother about my choice in my sexual orientation was like nothing I had experienced before. And so the feelings that came from it, the anger, the resentment, the remorse and the regret of telling her about it, of admitting it, of not keeping it a secret, battled with my pride and with my ego. And I want to be a proud woman. I want to be somebody who is confident, somebody who wasn't ashamed of what I was doing, because that's on the court, that's who I was. I was a very confident person, and I wanted that to be who I was in life as well, but I hadn't had the chance to really explore what that looked like. What is it like to be a confident Carissa outside of basketball? At 15, I hadn't learned that yet. And so I felt like my legs had been cut from underneath me. And those feelings were present all the time. They didn't go away. This wasn't something I could just sweep under the rug. It wasn't something I could just ignore or pretend like it wasn't there. I couldn't shove them in the bottle of emotions that I had. They refused to stay trapped. They refused to be held back. These feelings that I had, the anger that I had, the sorrow, the disappointment, they refused to be capped. And so I was now walking this emotion, what I used to keep hidden away so well and so accurately. Now I could no longer do it, because the feelings that I had for Martina, the feelings that I had for myself, the joy that I had whenever we were together of knowing that I could be more than just basketball. I could be more than just a student athlete. I had found somebody that I could share my life with. And to have that removed from me, it really triggered something inside of me that I really struggled with.
In the book, Martina mentions regretting maybe convincing you to do that, because worst case scenario happened, right? You couldn't have regrets at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, I look back at it and I think, what if, always hindsight, what if I wouldn't have said anything? What if I would have just finished off my senior year and, gotten to get out of the house and live my own life and be my own person? What if I just would have kept it to myself? What would my life look like? But I can't cry over spilt milk. And as much as it eats at me at times to think like what my life would look like or what it would have become, I can't go down that path because life is full of what ifs. And if I keep thinking about that, then I'm going to be missing what's happening in the present. But I know that Martina, we've had discussions about this, and she's talked to me about the regrets that she has and what she wished she would have done, and in hindsight, how she can see clearly now. And she's not alone in that. She wasn't the only one that was close to me that saw me struggling or might have been able to help, things go in a different direction. My best friend, my coach, my teammates, I know that they carry that burden as well of what could have been should they have done something different. I don't want people to live in that realm of what ifs because life happens and it is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of what you do with those things. And I don't want anybody to walk around with any heavy regrets of what came of my life because I am in control of what I'm doing and I love the direction I'm moving in. And even though I've had to struggle and I know that I've put a lot of people through pain, I'm sorry. I know I put a lot of people through pain. And for that, I will be forever sorry. I can't take it back.
Right.
And so what I decide to do today, I hope is an honest reflection of my redemption. I know I did wrong, but that is not the end of me. And I just hope that I have a chance to make those people proud.
Right. This is the part of in your life and in the book where the first mention of suicide comes up. First of all, was that the first time it had ran through your mind? And kind of take us through it.
Yeah, suicide was a very familiar, accomplice in my life at that time, and unfortunately, it became somewhat of a comfort to fall back on, to always have that as an option. But suicide, yes, that was the first time that I really thought about following through with it. I had struggled with depression, but, being a child, I was able to just kind of let things roll through, moments roll by. But as I started to mature and I saw that my future was so dismal, in my opinion, and in my view, that's when I really started thinking, why live for tomorrow? What is tomorrow going to bring? More pain? What is tomorrow going to bring? More disappointment? More shame? More lies?
Now, did Martina showing up at your doorstep, basically, did you take that as a sign of, hey, I got to tread through here? Or it seems in the book you kind of just said, okay, I'm going to push on with the plan. Mm-hmm. This is just something that kind of happened. I mean, looking back on it, was that a pretty big sign that she showed up on your doorstep there? Or, take us through that.
Yeah, gosh. Again, the what ifs. Like, what if I would have listened or paid attention to that? Absolutely. I have grown so much in who I am and who I'm becoming that I now can see that, the energy that you put out to the universe, it will match you. It's seeking you as well, that same energy. And I was crying out for help. In every way, shape, or form. I was crying out to the universe for help because I did not want to go down that path. I did not want that to be my ultimate end. Innately, I didn't, but I couldn't find a way to overcome that. I was sinking and I was drowning, and I did not have, the support or the lifesaver that I needed. At the time, I couldn't see it, and even when it was I chose, or I was unable to really see it for what it was worth, to see that that was an option, that was my chance to bail out, that was my time to express my intentions. But I had been disciplined so well to keep things hidden, to smile and make things look like it's all sparkles and glitter and that I'm okay and that I don't need it. and that I will survive and overcome, because that's what I had been trained, that's what I had been taught to do. And my mother drilled that in me very well, and it was deeply rooted. And so am I surprised that I chose not to reach out and look for help? I'm not surprised at all, because how could I have expected anything else? We are a product of what we teach, to what we learn, our environments. That's what children are. They're a product of what they're exposed to. So actually looking for help and receiving it, being able to receive help, I hadn't been taught that. So at the time, how would I expect myself to receive that help, even when it was right in front of my face? I couldn't, and I didn't.
One of the things that I didn't realize until reading the book was just how quickly this went from a suicide attempt to what actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
Take us through as much of that as you want, or as little as you want, I should say, and we'll go to break right after that.
Okay. Yeah, I still very vividly can think back to those moments. And this came, my memory of these events and these nights, they were not with me this entire time. It wasn't until much later after my crime that I was able to really access these memories. The brain is a powerful thing. It's a powerful muscle, and it was protecting me for a long time after my crime. It was something I couldn't cope with. It was something that would have maybe spilled into something much more damaging. A mental health order would have really, really, blown up from it. But it wasn't until years later, after I was able to receive therapy and coping skills and just accepting my life for what it was, that these memories of that night really came back. And so now that I recall them, it's vivid, and I can see how 16-year-old Carissa went from failed attempts of suicide, to transitioning into attempted murder thoughts and homicide thoughts. And that distinctly came in when I replayed why I was going down this path in the first place. Replaying why was I at the point that I was at to thinking of taking my life. And my mother had said something very specific that directly triggered my thoughts and the direction that I was going to go in. And I'm an individual that really analyzes. I'm an analytical thinker. I like to break things down and fully see them from different perspectives. I play devil's advocate in my own mind all the time, just to really get a holistic view of things. And that's just been in my nature. And so when I was replaying some of my mom's words back to me, a line that she specifically said to me directly triggered where my thought process went. And there's no blame in that. There's no blame in that. I'm 100% accountable for my actions. This is just the reality of what I went through as a 16-year-old, the thoughts that the pattern that I went by, I went through. It wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't something that just grew up from the ground. It was something that, I had heard, and I never had entertained the idea of it being a possibility until I was pushed to the edge. And when you're pushed to the edge, there's no way of seeing or anticipating what could come from that, because everybody's edge is different. I could not anticipate that my edge would lead me down that path. I didn't know that until I got there. And I was looking over the edge and wondering, what will happen if I'm over that edge? What is truly going to come of this? And that is what mental health at its worst will do to you. It will push you to your edge and not give you a way back.
We'll be right back.
Well, I'm going to the frontier, walk up to the cashier, order up a root beer and a number one. Cover it with green stuff, one scoop is not enough. Find a booth is real tough, back by the Duke. Meet my family, meet my friends in the quirkiest restaurant I have ever been. All of Albuquerque's favorite spot, it's the Frontier Restaurant.
The Frontier Restaurant is a proud supporter of Proview Sports Network.
Sadie's is a proud supporter of New Mexico high school sports and athletics, and we here at Proview Networks would like to thank Sadie's for their continued support in helping us bring you all of your New Mexico high school sports coverage.
We're back with Carissa McGee, author of Trust Your Struggle, which you can get on Amazon and BookBuddy. And did you think you'd ever see Martina again?
Yes.
So you had that faith?
Yes, I did.
Which the book talks about. Obviously, that helped you through your incarceration.
Yes.
And even that is a story. I mean, this is going to sound so sappy, but there's parts of this book where it's like, this is a modern New Mexico version of Shawshank Redemption, right? I'm thinking Andy Dufresne all the way when you're helping other inmates appeal things and stuff like that. But we'll get to, I mean, we'll get to some of that. But I mean, talk about finding your purpose while you're incarcerated, and struggling through.
Yes, that was talk about redemption. Talk about redemption. When I went in, I was sentenced to 21 years. Nobody really explained to me what good time was. I just went in thinking I was going to do flat out 21 years. I was 17 walking in, 16 when I was incarcerated. So I thought, you know, when I'm
not charged as a minor, obviously.
Not charged as a minor. I thought, you know, when I'm 38, I will be walking out of these prison doors. So I went in, with a heavy heart. I mean, yes, that was a very, very dark time in my life. And I spent the first 4 years of my incarceration not really thinking about anything other than how am I going to survive this day, right now, today, this moment? What is going to happen and how can I cope with it? It wasn't until I was introduced to the New Mexico Peer Education Project. It is a prison-based program through the University of New Mexico. And its goal is to educate the inmate population on, you know, infectious diseases, in particular hepatitis C. It covers everything from staph and MRSA to diabetes to addiction. So it covers an array of health topics. And when I first was introduced to it, I thought, you know, like, what am I going to do with this health information? You know, like I'm in prison. What am I going to be able to do with this? But I thought, you know what? The person who thought of me, who thought highly of me, recommended me to do it. So I took the advice and I followed through. And gosh, yes, man, way to listen. I finally started to listen to the universe. You know, again, I was crying out, what am I going to do? How am I going to survive this? What am I going to amount to? And the universe responded, and it sent me to the New Mexico Peer Education Project. I joined that program, and I did a 180. I was introduced to the meaning of service, to its fullest potential. And I realized that it was through serving others in my community that I was able to develop my purpose. Whether that be about health topics, that's how I first got introduced to it. But what it grew into was about developing leaders and self-efficacy and empowering women to stand on their stories, not in shame and not in bragging rights, but as just confident women who know that, yes, this is true, this is something that I've done, my past is my past, but I get to decide what my future looks like. This is what that program introduced in me. And I loved it, I thrived off of it, and I went from not really caring about what my neighbors or my sisters were going through, not really worrying about the next person beside me and their struggles, and just all about me, and my woes and my pain. And I went from that to really listening and caring and connecting with these women and understanding that their pains and their struggles were similar to mine. And I wasn't alone in this fight. I'm not alone. I don't have to stay that way. I have, whatever destiny I want to create, I have the opportunity to do that. And I can do that by inspiring other people to live to their fullest potential. And that's something that, I mean, I want everybody to have that. I want everybody to know how incredible it feels to be alive, to be free, and to know your purpose and to know your fullest potential. Because it's only in doing that that I was able to take my prison experience and use it as motivation, use it as a springboard to actually giving back. Instead of being ashamed, instead of being, belittled and allowed it to, to cripple me in any way, I have now taken my story and I use it to help other people who might be struggling. I use it to motivate other people who have walked my similar walk. I use it as, just a talking space for people who might struggle to express themselves. Just knowing that I could use my story in a way that brings other people out, that brings other struggles out of people, and knowing that it's a story that, redemption is possible. That came from purpose, and without that purpose, it's really hard to imagine what life could be like. And I don't want anybody to live without a purpose. It's a dark place to be. So, I give a lot of credit to the New Mexico Peer Education Project because they saw me for a person. They didn't see me for a number. They never saw me as an inmate. They almost refused to call us inmates and prisoners. They see us as individuals.
And just the way you're speaking about it now, you have to remind yourself that this happened behind bars, in prison, right?
Yeah,
the way you speak of it, of this great program, is you think of it almost as an academic thing that happened down the street at UNM, but that's really not the case.
Yeah.
So it had to be so much more challenging to go through that and implement that while incarcerated, right?
Yeah, it was, but it's a testament to our perspective on life. That's really how I see it, because yes, we did all these things behind bars and everybody thinks like that's miraculous. But what the project is really highlighting is that it's not just like this big, bad, scary place and everybody that's in prison are terrible people and they're villains and they deserve to be there. They're tearing down that wall, that stigma, that taboo that inmates and prisoners are terrible people, because they treat us as the people that we are. We are first and foremost humans.
But you had seen the parts of the system that were broken, and you go through that in your book, right?
Absolutely.
With some of the meetings with the warden or the chief. Mm-hmm. So you'd seen the broken parts of the system, but you just absolutely seem to excel at the parts of the system that were there to help you.
Yeah.
Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, that is absolutely 100%. The fact that the Department of Corrections has agreed to collaborate with the university and invite something that is so abnormal into the system, and they're accepting and supportive of it, that just speaks to the strides that we're making in the right direction. Because prison has been such taboo. It's a world of its own. Nobody wants to really get involved with it because it's got its stigma about it. And so for DOC, Department of Corrections, to open their doors to this opportunity, which is so unique, I mean, that speaks wonders to where we're going as a state, with our incarceration, with our justice system, and with the recidivism that we're trying to reduce here in our state.
Well, you're getting pretty good at this television thing, because that's a perfect segue to Real Talk, right? So tell us about that, how you were able to establish that.
Yeah, that was my pride and joy while I was incarcerated. So I was really inspired through the New Mexico Peer Education Project to take what I know and to use it to motivate other people. That's essentially what we do in this project. Leaders build leaders. And like I said, this New Mexico Peer Education Project is about the health topics and the things that are really relevant to that arena in prisons, But the women who participated in those classes, they would reach out to me on a side note and let me know, because I lived there. Peer educators, you live with this community. So it's not that you're just training them, you get to stand side by side with them. So after our classes, the women would take me aside and share some more intimate details of what they struggled with. It might have started with a health topic of, I struggle with addiction, but it grew into something much more. They were struggling with accepting their past. They were struggling with their ability to express themselves, communicate appropriately, with the interpersonal violence that they might have just, had to endure with their partners before they were incarcerated. And, they would ask for ways to overcome this. And I saw that as an opportunity to provide service to my community, right? Which was fueling my purpose. And so me and 2 other women who were also peer educators, we brainstormed what we could actually do to answer these women's needs and their requests. And, together collectively, we were able to brainstorm a phenomenal program. And I was able to, with the support of the staff, right? There are some very, very powerful and positive staff members inside the correction system that allowed me, my freedom to create a curriculum, which, mind you, I had never done before. But with the motivation, with the encouragement from the project, from New Mexico Peer Education, I felt like I could do this. I felt like I could take on this battle. And so for 8 months and some change, I just chugged away at developing this curriculum that was solely based off of the needs and the wants from the population I was aiming to serve. And 8 months and some change later, I was able to produce this 6-week curriculum that answered, I felt, the women's needs. And it was amazing to see it roll out, just because, again, I had not really seen basketball in a different form, that love and that discipline and appreciation in a different form, until I really put my heart into real talk. I gave it everything that I had. I diligently worked on it. I critiqued myself. I was honest with myself, and I pushed myself as much as I could. And to reap the rewards of that, which were successful classes, women thanking us, standing up, being inspired, speaking for themselves, coming to terms with their past, just being able to watch the women thrive from the curriculum, it was one of the most satisfying feelings I've ever felt. And that's when I really got to understand that freedom is not physical. Freedom is a state of mind. And even though I was in prison and I was still in my 9x15 cell, and I still had to follow all those rules and endure the hardships of prison, I was able to still experience freedom, because my mind was not weighed down with the depression or with the suicidal ideologies or with any of that negative, baggage that I carried with myself. I was able to experience what it felt like to be proud of something positive that I was doing with my life outside of basketball, which was really remarkable for me.
Sadly, we're coming up on the end of our time. Carissa, what would be the one thing, if a freshman athlete is watching this, or any athlete for that matter, what's the one thing you hope they take away from this show and your story?
One, the first thing I'd want them to take away is they're not alone. They are not alone. And there are people, even if it's not in the form of their family or what they would expect it to come, the people, what they're supposed to look like, people care. And they are worthy of having somebody to talk to, somebody to listen. They are just as deserving of support and love. And I really hope that they get from reading my story that they don't need to look externally for things to, pull them out of the muck and the mire, to get them through whatever they're going through. They innately carry that ability to overcome their obstacles. And what I really want them to know is that if they trust their struggle and whatever they're going through, there will be a day that they get to reap the benefits of their hard work, because it does pay off. You just can't quit, because even it's going to be hard. It will be hard, but it'll be worth it.
Your courage and your willingness to do this is just absolutely amazing, Carissa.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Carissa McGee was my guest. This is the book, Trust Your Struggle. I do hope you get a copy on Amazon or on BookBuddy. And I hope that this story was beneficial to you. It's a story that included 2 Gatorade Player of the Year awards, but it included suicide, depression, homicide, incarceration, and rehabilitation. And all those things are real, and they're all difficult. Thanks for joining us.
Sadie's is a proud supporter of New Mexico high school sports and athletics, and we here at Proview Networks would like to thank Sadie's for their continued support in helping us bring you all of your New Mexico high school sports coverage.